project planner review the authentication of the exercise has authentication.
What's that?
Are we gonna review the authentication in today's exercise?
I hadn't planned on it because the topic that we're covering today is rather large. And we've got two exercises for the final project that I wanted to get through. So I don't think I have any.
Yeah.
What time do you start?
What's that?
What time do you start?
Yep.
Okay.
Hi. Are you here for JavaScript?
Actually, I think I might have left a charger over here. That's why. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, I guess we'll just get started. How's it going? How's everybody's week? Everybody filed their taxes. We talked about that last time. And I assume everybody else is off getting stoned somewhere. Not outside though, probably. It looks like it's gonna rain.
Well, Karen says coming.
It's coming.
Yeah, right.
Today's weather was super weird.
All night?
It's gonna rain all night.
I don't think so, but I think it's like a big patch coming.
It's gonna rain over the weekend.
Oh,
Science march all ruined.
oh no.
Well,
Science march.
People will come out in the rain.
Yeah, probably.
We're gonna be posters on work today.
Oh yeah. Is that like work mandated for you guys? Like
One of our
strongly
clients is
encouraged.
the American Association for Sciences.
There you go. They're gonna want a nice picture of everyone at Blue State Digital holding their signs. Climate change is real.
I won't do that.
Oh man, that's really funny. I don't think we have any science clients. Cool. So let's see. What was the homework? There was no homework assignment, right? Just I don't think there was. Just no programming assignment. Just working on your final project
and reading.
and the reading. Who read the article? The Alex Herman or something like that?
So is that the very last one?
The one about authentication. I have the assignment right here. I can pull it up.
That's Jared.
The Herman one. If there's an article that I posted by Michael Herman, maybe M. Herman, about authentication, and it is relatively similar to the lesson that we did, or the exercise that we built out. So if you're still confused, you can follow along with that. It's not as like detailed as the lesson was, but yeah, that's another one. The authentication, the docs for Passport, documentation for Passport is really good. It's really well written, so that's always one option. Sorry? It's in the assignment.markdown file under the assignment heading. It's the very last bullet. So today we're going to be talking about single page applications, what they are, and we'll build one. This is roughly the agenda that we're going to follow for today. The class is really going to be split into two parts. The first, working through 2 exercises for the final project, and then the second part, working through what an SPA is, why it's important, how to think about them conceptually, and then building one. And we'll spend most of the time building one. So here we are, rapidly approaching the very end of this class, where you'll all have to get up here and present your incredible apps or be shamed.
Shame.
Shame.
Shame. Shame.
No shaming. No shaming will happen. There will be no shaming.
That's my slider is so good.
What was that?
My slider is just.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That was a good one.
Can we even use a plugin for the slider?
What? Why would you use a plugin? You know how to build your own. Why would you use a plugin?
NPM slider.
Yeah, NPM install slider. See like owl carousel or something up here? No. I will kick you out. I will kick you
What
out.
if it's like more than like the 5 slides? It's
Yeah.
like 20
Oh, there's like 6 slides? No. Get out. Oh my god. Okay. Let's talk about the final project so that nobody builds a freaking slider. Okay. So the final project, we've already talked about it. Today we're going to do 2 sort of user experience exercises today. Is anybody here user experience designer, researcher, or something like that professionally?
No.
Semi-professionally?
I mean, I took interface design in college, and I was an art major for a year, but it's not unofficial.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we're going to do these 2 exercises. One is called wireframing, the other is called writing user journeys. The reason we're doing this is so that we can think sort of holistically about the application that we're going to be building at a high level, but still with like a lot of detail, or like a good level of granularity about each feature. Each exercise, both wireframing and user journeys, are aimed at giving us like a very clear picture of our application, and like how each works, each part of our application works. So, like, who wants to talk about these for a minute? Does anybody know what wireframing is? Oops. Has anybody heard of wireframing? What's like a good definition of wireframing? What is wireframing?
Like a bare bones black and white prototype.
Yeah, prototype. Perfect. Yeah, it's like a very rough, low fidelity is like the buzzword, prototype of our application. Oops. So it's a sketch of our application, very, very rough sketch of our application. The reason we do it is to test out our application and how the different components work together. We can really, really quickly with like some paper and a marker, just like draw it all out and then actually see it in place and then decide like, actually, this is too complicated. We need to break this up a little bit. Like this one feature needs to become 2 features or something like that. Wireframes are meant to be very quick and rough sketches, so no detail. If you want to do a picture, you just draw a box and put an X through it or something like that. If you want to have a button, just make a box with like an arrow or something to indicate that it's button to the next screen. Cool. And yeah, that's pretty much everything that I just said. Okay, so we're going to do it in class today. We're going to actually test out and wireframe our application. So I have put together in the project README, if you look in the final project folder, a sample README, you're going to do, you're going to submit this, something like this sample README for your homework for the next class, or as your homework for the next class. It will include what we're calling the UI draft, which we started for today's class, and should include like pictures of your wireframe. So this sample that I've thrown together is for an application for a farmer farm. There's a data set that I found that includes, probably not all, but many of the farmers markets around the United States. So the application lets you sign in and then save your favorite farmers markets, local farmers markets. You can favorite them, and then you can interact with other users who go to that market, stuff like that. So that's the application. If I wanted to wireframe it, how might I start? Or where might I start?
On the index page.
Yeah, homepage. So we'll start at the homepage. So all we really want on the homepage is for people to see like what our application is, why they might want to use it, and then be able to go to a page where they can sign up. All right? So to wireframe that, we'll have maybe a box. This is going to represent our page here. We'll have a header or something, right, with like our title. What should we call our application?
Marketplace. Farmer find.
Finding farmers.
What was that?
Finding farmers.
Finding farmers. Let's go with that. All right. We'll do some features here, like title and then some descriptions. We'll have an icon or something with some more descriptions. And then let's put a map here or something, like my Google Map pin with maybe some directions to the nearest farmer market. And then up here I'll have a button. That's going to sign you up. And then down here I might have another button. That'll take you to the sign up page. So home page done. What do you guys think?
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's not bad. Okay, so we want them to go from the home page to the sign up page, right? So I'll draw an arrow here and here, and we'll draw another box here. This is gonna be a sign up page. What kind of elements am I probably gonna have on my sign up page?
Form.
Yeah, just form. So box with another box, with another box, with another box. And this box is a button, so I'll color it. Cool. So they sign up. Where should we go after they've signed up?
Confirmation page or kind of depends on what we want, right?
Yes. So
There,
yeah,
to the map,
the map.
yeah, where they will find their.
Oh yeah, like a page where they can search for farmers or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do
Into
that.
the meat and bones of the application.
Yes. So we'll do that. This button will come to this page here. Oh no. Page here. We'll have like a header that says something like welcome, like a button up here to log out or something. And then let's do like a panel here where we're gonna have like a list of markets, and then here we'll have a map. Good. Okay. Boom. Done. That's the spelling. Cool. So that's it. That's all we're gonna do. So we're gonna spend. Let's do 20 minutes, but we'll break it up and see how we're doing every maybe like 10 minutes. And think about our own applications. I have paper and a couple of pens that I can lend people. The goal is to map out more or less every view in our application in this 20-minute time. Okay? Okay. So raise your hand if you need some paper. Or does anybody need paper and pen? Just let me know. So we've been going for about 5 minutes. The goal is to have a rough sketch for every view of your application, but we're going to go through this multiple times. So try and just get an idea for every view down, and then we'll iterate on some of them in 5 or 10 minutes or so.
Submit this as a file.
Yep.
So do that as a picture from that or something?
Yep.
Are you gonna put it in the final project?
Don't worry about it right now. For now, just get your wireframes together.
If you're not specifically labeling anything wireframe, correct? Like with other than like icons.
Yeah, just like draw an icon. The point is just get it through really fast. Get through it as quickly as possible. And then, is there another way to organize?
Cool.
Okay. How are we doing? Who has finished all of the views for their application? Everybody? Raise your hands high. Okay, awesome. So, the reason we're doing this is to figure out how it is we're actually going to build out our application. So, just going through it once isn't necessarily enough. We need to iterate. So here I've defined one example of how I can do it. How can I iterate on this? So we're going to keep the home page more or less the same, and that's going to take you to a sign up page. And then this page here, instead of doing this welcome page, I'm going to have this go to the user's profile. which is gonna have maybe your title, a button up here in the top to log out, how long they've been a user for, maybe some other information, and then a section here where we're gonna have all of their favorited farmers markets, if they have favorite farmers markets. When you first create an account, you won't have any yet. So, Dropbox here, and bring this over here, and then we can make a couple of versions of this box. So one, it'll say, no farmers markets. And then we'll have a search field here with an input and then a search button with a little arrows. Or what we can do is have like a picture with a little map with the location of the farmer's market maybe, and then the hours or I don't know, some other information about it. And we'll do one of those for each of the farmer's markets that we favorited. I like that. What do you guys think of that? Cool. So now I want everybody to take a view that they've wireframed in their application and come up with at least 2 other variations of that view. How they might organize how you might organize the exact same data in a different way. Like I just did here.
Are you based on the instance that they come to the page, or just like a new design because you're just trying something new?
Yeah, we just want to take a view and try a couple of variations on it. 2 variations.
Yeah, I just started missing.
Has everybody, raise your hand if you've finished your 2 variations. I'll give you another 5 minutes, at which point we will move on. Okay. So who wants to walk us through their wireframe? Starting with the first version and then talking about the 2 iterations that they made. Any volunteers? Okay. Hold it up so that we can see,
Oh,
if you don't mind.
that's fine, okay, so I did it, so my first wireframe was what I did when I first did the project in Director, and it is designed with CD-ROM, but I'll show you one of my designs. Okay, I know where it is right here. So,
Do you mind just showing us what you drew today?
oh, yeah, so I drew this really quickly in MS Paint.
Okay.
It's supposed to be like these hands are supposed to touch the characters to go to the page. Right now I'm only dealing with this little one. And then I go to the quiz. And then I drew like a quick questionnaire with a video and then 3 options. And then the correct, and then the wrong one removes and make it some positive, show the correct. And then the congratulations page, positive sense. But I did it in the sense of like, it still was an interactive CD-ROM. So then I did it again as wireframes, as like, as more like a web page. And so, I did, like the index page and a couple of the other pages, but the quiz is now set up for desktop and mobile, and then 2 types of, success, or you finished the quiz concept. One being positive and one being like, you didn't do so well, and trying to promote like,
Try again later.
let's log in to create an account and check out, show your progress,
Cool.
assess your progress.
Perfect. Okay, so the next UX little thing we're going to do is called user journeys. User journeys are a way for us to create a map of how all the possibilities through which like someone can navigate through our application. So, I should have erased that. If I draw here, can everybody see? All right. Yeah. Okay. So users are going to come in. They're going to go to the home page. From there, they're going to have to log in. From there, they're going to go to their profile page. Here's where it starts to split off. Because from here, I can go to the page for a market. I can go to the profile of a friend. I can go to a search page. And for good measure, I can go to my stories. Because you can't build an app without having stories. Cool. So let's see. From the market, it lists view for the individual market. Let's say I can go to Google Maps. I'll just call it GM. And then I can go to an individual profile from there. Somebody else who follows this market. I can click on their profile link and go see their profile. And then from there, I can go to any other market page or any other profile, etc. From a friend's profile, I can also go to a market or another profile. And from search, let's see, I can narrow my search, but I'll do that on the actual search page there. And then I can go to an individual market. And then I'm not actually going to build that.
What are stories? Like that's
Oh,
stories
like
about people.
Facebook stories, Instagram stories, Snapchat,
Like social media
Twitter
stuff.
stories, yeah.
I think these are stories and I missed something.
Oh, no. stories like you can make quick videos or whatever, and then they compile into a timeline. Scrub through. Cool. All right. So there's like some circular stuff here, right? From profile, I can go to market, and from a market, I can go back to profile. And that market, I can go to a different profile, et cetera, or I can go maybe from market to market to market to market. If I have like my market view, I have a list of nearby markets. Can click through, tell the different markets, et cetera. But we'll kind of leave that for now. So I'll give everybody, what's it? You guys think 5 minutes? Yeah, we'll do 5 minutes on this. We'll regroup. I'm happy to give you guys more time. We need to, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll get into single page application. Question?
How is it different than a flowchart?
How is it different than a flowchart? That is a great question for somebody who is a professional UX designer.
Okay.
This is mapping. The point of this is to map all of the like routes someone can use to navigate through our application.
Okay. Okay. It's just the charting because the sets are the same.
Yeah. It's a chart of like how someone can get through our application.
If your app is already designed like single page application, then what is like just different parts of the app?
Yeah, right. So even if you're building out a single page application, it's all happening in one page, but there are different like actions that someone can take to change what's on the page, right?
But it's all presentation.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we get into building out an SPA, but someone can click the button to create a new to-do item or something for a to-do list. That's going to render a view. So homepage, new to-do view, back to the to-do list. If anybody needs more paper, let me know. Do people want a couple more minutes? No? Okay. Okay, we'll stop there. Okay. So we're gonna take a break for 10 minutes. Before we do, what did you guys think of these two exercises? Were they helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah? Good. Good. The reason that I wanted to do them was, as I said before, to like make sure that we all have a really clear picture of how our application will work, like what the features are, how they interact with each other, right? The other reason for doing these two exercises in particular is from wireframing, we can pull out a list of all the views that we'll need to build out, whether we're building out a single page application or not a single page application, right? So we'll have a list of views and more or less all the markup that we're going to need to write for those views, but the HTML will be. The reason for doing these user journeys is from this, I can pull out all of the routes that my application will. I'll need an index route for my home page. I'll need a login route. I will need a profile route, maybe a couple of routes around profiles. I will need a route for searching. I'll need a route for profile we already have. And then I'll need a route for market. There we go. Those are all the routes that my application will need. Cool. So from this and the exercises that we've done before, hopefully we can pull like a pretty detailed structure for what we need to build out, without having to like try and think about that as we're trying to code. Okay. All right. 10 minutes. Everybody, go get a soda or PB&J or a cup of coffee. Go to the back room. Stand up and do some Tai Chi in place. Yeah.
Somebody ever done this?
No. So that's the next. When I did WDI, at the end of WDI, we had to give presentations. Did you have to do that?
Like our projects.
Yeah, like week 12.
Yeah.
We didn't have to present our projects. We just had to do a presentation.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we had to get up and we had to do a 10-minute presentation, and it could be about anything. Most people did theirs about like code stuff, right? Like someone did theirs about Flexbox. I did mine on Meteor, this JavaScript framework. One kid did his on Tai Chi. Yeah, and he like talked about the history of Tai Chi, and he did a demo, and then he like led the class in a demo of like Tai Chi. It was really cool.
Actually, I was just trying to figure out how to get coffee, and so I just did that. But it just made, I was like, oh, coffee machine, that's small. That's my cup.
Oh, how's your coffee?
It's good. How are people feeling about the final project? Not good?
Excited
Excited? Yeah, I think you should be excited.
for now. Still.
I mean, it's gonna be a challenge. Yeah, it's gonna be challenging, right? But like, the thing to keep in perspective is we're building relatively substantial apps, right? It's not like Facebook, right? Like, it's not huge, but these are like substantial apps that everybody is describing. 10 weeks ago, could you have done any of it?
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
You can make it.
Woohoo! Okay.
Just so close.
Yeah.
I couldn't, sorry.
Anyway.
Speak for everybody.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about single page applications. It's a topic that everyone's probably pretty familiar with on a conceptual level. We're going to talk about it more. We'll start talking about that conceptual level, get into some of the technical concepts, like what it is, what makes it unique, why we have them, and then we're going to build one. The struggle for me in terms of like preparing for this class is single page applications by themselves require a lot of like logic. So we have frameworks that handle a lot of that logic for us. Ember is one, Backbone is another really popular one, Angular, Vue, React kind of. React is really complicated. And they abstract away a lot of the logic for us. We are not going to use a framework today. We're going to do it all by hand. That's going to show us how they work, right? What a framework would do for us. But it means that we don't have to like learn that stuff and then learn a framework. We can learn that stuff and then like that's what the framework is doing behind the scenes.
What do you mean by logic?
So, you remember when we talked about handlebars a couple of weeks ago? One of the things we're going to use handlebars today on the client, but we are going to have to write the logic for when views get rendered.
Okay.
So someone's going to create a to-do list. We're going to create a to-do list. Someone's going to click a link to create a new one. We're going to have to like render the view and then like add the event listeners to it. All that stuff we're going to have to do by hand ourselves. That's the logic. And we'll talk about it once we're actually building it, and it'll make more sense. So what is a single page application? Does anybody have a definition to get us started? Any kind of understanding?
It's when all your code just loads and spawns on one page. That's my concept of like there's only one index file that everything gets loaded into.
Yeah.
Index.html, for example.
Yeah, or an index.js file. Yeah, it's a browser-based application that never reloads the page or transitions from one page to the next. Everything happens in a single page. That's perfect. So the applications that we've built so far have looked like this. And many applications today still look like this, right? Most of the work that we do is here in the server. Most of the applications we've built so far, all of the logic is here. All we're doing here is maybe adding some event listeners. We could add some nice UI animations or something like that. But if we think of like where the bulk of the code for an application is, the vast majority of it is here. In a single page application, this is switched. So a single page application looks like this, down here at the bottom, compared to a traditional application like this, up here at the top. So a traditional application, we've got our models, our data, right, over here in the database. This is gonna store our data as well as have some logic for finding a to-do or a farmer's market or something, creating new farmer's markets. Then we're gonna have our server. This is where we're gonna do things like authentication, which we talked about last time, authorization, which we just kind of mentioned in the last class. And then validating any data, making sure that what the client is sending us is data that we actually want or in the format that we actually want. All of our business logic is going to be here. If we have to maybe calculate the distance between two farmers markets or something, that's going to be here. And then rendering our views is also going to be here on the server. So when we use Express, for instance, we're rendering, Express with handlebars. We're rendering full HTML pages here on the server, and then sending that full HTML page down to the client. The single page application tries to push as much of that to the client. So some of these things are things that the client has gotten really good at, like generating views. If we can send all of our views to the client at once, then we just need a little bit of logic to handle when one view should be rendered versus another. And then our user already has all of the views. So that when we need to render another one, it can happen very quickly.
Isn't that what we're doing now? That's not
Our Express applications are doing this. So we have handlebars templates, but they're all being rendered on the server. And then when the client goes to our homepage, for instance, our server is going to build a full HTML page, full HTML document, and send the full and complete document back to our client. So all the HTML generation is happening here on the server. Business logic we can push to the client. Browsers are fast now. So are computers. And we can use the hardware on our client's machine, their laptop. So we can calculate the distance between two farmers markets right there on the client. We don't have to come back to the server and then send that information back to the client. We can just do it right there on the client. And then decorative JS, things like that, we already had on the client. Event listeners, UI, animations or transitions, etc.
All of that business logic and stuff can only be done on like Angular and all these new languages, or
No. We use frameworks like Angular to make our lives as developers easier, and so that we can build applications faster. Yeah.
It's similar to Bootstrap when it comes to building HTML and styles.
Yeah, Bootstrap is like a CSS framework with a bunch of conventions for how you name classes and things like that that you can kind of compose together and build out a page really relatively quickly. Something like Angular or Backbone. There are conventions in each of these frameworks, like a set of opinions they implement in how your application should be built. And then that lets a framework abstract away a lot of the logic that we would have to perform in order to perform our business logic, or in order to generate some HTML on the page.
In terms of what anyone can see on the browser, pardon my notes, because you can see the JavaScript and CSS and all that in the browser. Do you see all the code in the server too?
On the server, no. Servers, sorry. No. So we lock down the server because we don't want anybody to be able to run code on the server. And definitely one of the downsides of a client-side application is we're sending all of the code for our application to the client, to any client. And they can open it and read it and steal our business logic or whatever, or see how we built the application. And that's pretty common. Like a lot of times at my job, if I see a website that we really like, we'll look at the code and see how they're doing something. So if you're doing something sensitive, then you would do it on the server. But otherwise, yeah, all that stuff is on the client. So when you browse through an application, you can look at it.
so there's no way to like mask any of that on the client? Or-
Not really. I mean, you can obfuscate code. So like we can run our JavaScript through a program that will take it and like rename all the variables and all the functions. And that makes the file size smaller, right? Because our function name is like, render the to-do list view or something like that. And then it gets renamed to the letter A or something like
Is that
that.
the same as minifying, or is that?
It's part of minifying. There's like weird like minifying is like removing all the spaces and like overall trying to make your file size smaller. So it's part of minifying. Minifying and obfuscating, they get like bundled together.
Okay, yeah. I feel like whenever I've seen minified files, it's like that way, like it's just a bunch of random letters and
Yeah.
symbols. But
Yeah. Minifying is really just like making the file size smaller, but most minifying programs or whatever scripts will also obfuscate it for you. Make it less clear, make it unclear.
I won't remember that word at all.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Obfuscate, I can't say that. So the history of single page applications is tied to two things. One, the history of AJAX, right? Sending data back and forth from the client to the server without having to transit to like do a page change or actually go to the server. We can just send the data back and forth. The other thing that it is tied to is how powerful home or personal computers are and the browsers that we install. Early versions of browsers weren't very powerful, nor were computers 10 years ago. So we could do single page applications, but they wouldn't necessarily be fast and snappy like they are now. Faster and snappier than a regular application, but not compared to what we have now. Now, there's almost no reason not to build a single page application. Like most machines are fast enough, most browsers that people are using are fast enough, and most libraries out there, most of these frameworks make it relatively quick and easy to do. And the reason that we do them is to try and provide a really fluid, snappy, interactive experience. If we're only ever having to send data back and forth, then by nature, our application will be a little faster. Cool. All right, so we're gonna build one. Who's ready?
Do this.
Yeah. So everyone should run git pull upstream master to get the latest set of code. And then I've already pushed the solution for the application that we're about to start.
If we've done it earlier today, we have to do it again.
Yeah. If you haven't done it in the last 5 minutes, you should do it again. Because maybe 20, 30 minutes ago, I pushed some starter files for us. So if you go to the lesson for this class, actually do that here, there we go. And 16 spas. We're going to the spa today. Get some nice cucumber water. Inside the spas folder, there's an exercise folder. Within the exercise folder, there's a spa folder. That's the spa that we're going to do today. And a spa solution. That's the solution that we'll be building our application based off of. So we're going to start at the end. I want everyone to lift their hands from their laptops, maybe close your laptop or something like that, and we'll walk through kind of what it is we're going to build today. So this is what our final code base will look like. At the root level, we'll have a package.json file and a node modules folder, just like before. But we're going to have these two subdirectories, one called client and one called server. Does anybody remember what the client and the server are?
Client is the computer, the server is like the computers, or what happened before the computers.
Yeah, the client is the browser, or like what our user will interact with. And then the server is like the back end of our application. It's where we'll have our business logic. It's where we'll do our connections with the database, as you mentioned. So I guess in this application, we're actually going to do business logic in the client because it's a single page app. So the server I have provided in the starter files. The server is just a very simple Express application. We've got Express, we're using Mongoose. We only have one model, and that's for a to-do, because we're building out a to-do list application. We're connecting to Mongo. We have a root route, which is going to send the string hello world. And then we're using a router for our to-dos, just like we introduced last class. If we go ahead and look at that router, we've got our model for to-dos. We've got, this is just a little piece of middleware to console log the request. Every time someone visits a route in our to-do router. And then we've got a couple routes. We've got a root route for our to-dos. This is going to return every to-do. We have a post route, so if somebody tries to send us a route to-do, we'll go ahead and save that into the database. So we're creating a new to-do, we're saving it, and then once it's saved, we'll go ahead and get all the new list of to-dos, and we'll send that back to the client. And then we've got a route to get to-dos by a single ID, so /to-dos/1 to get our first to-do. We'll go ahead and look that to-do up in our database and then send it back to the client. And then we're actually not going to use this edit route. That can be a bonus, being able to edit a to-do. All right. And then the last bit is our model. All we have in our model is a title, a description, and then a Boolean for whether or not our to-do has been completed. Okay. Are we all, how do we feel about all this? Pretty straightforward?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So our client has three files: an HTML file, a CSS file, and a JavaScript file. Our HTML file is a basic HTML file, right? We've got a title and a header here, a footer. This element with an ID of app, that's where our actual application is going to go. And then we've got some handlebars templates down here. One for the full to-do list, which is going to list every to-do. One to create a new to-do, which is going to have a field for the title and a field for the description for the to-do. And then we'll have another to-do, another template, excuse me, like a show template for a single to-do. So when I click on a single to-do item, this show template will render and it will show me the title and the description for that to-do. And then I can go back to the list of to-dos up at the top. All right. My CSS file is like just some CSS, nothing major there. And then my JavaScript file, we're going to follow roughly an MVC pattern here. So here I have an object for my views. Within it, I have three views: the to-do list, a new to-do, and then a single to-do, i.e. those templates that I just walked through. We'll come back to the model. I have this setup function, which we're going to run at the beginning. This setup function is going to go to the DOM, get every template. All my templates start with this word template here. Get every single one, loop through them, and then like prepare them or whatever with handlebars, compile them, and then add that to my views object. So for now, if we look at this to-do list, we have this setup function. This is the function we're going to call after we've rendered this to-do list view. But there's no logic in here for rendering that to-do list view yet. That's what this is taking care of here. So what we'll be able to do is this on lines 121 and 122. we'll be able to say app.enterHTML is equal to views.todolist.render, and then we'll pass in our data. Once we've done that, we can call the setup function for to-do list, our to-do list view. And that's gonna attach some event listeners, do anything else that we wanna do once this HTML is on the page. Okay? And then the last part here is our model. This is our front-end model for a to-do. It's gonna contain all of our individual to-dos and then have a function for us to create a new to-do. So when someone submits that form, we'll capture it with an event listener, get the input fields from that form and the values inside of them, and then we'll call this function, to-do.create. And we'll pass in the object representing our new to-do and a callback that's gonna get called once this new to-do has successfully been created in our database on our server. We're gonna do some AJAX here, send a post request to our server, send the data back as a JSON string, and then when we get the response and that response is successful, we'll go ahead and call this callback function and pass it the response. All right, let's actually get into it. Oops. So I am now in this SPA folder. This is where we're going to build out our single page application in class right now. If you guys want to follow along, you can open up your laptops again and go along. Oh yeah, absolutely. So if we look here, I have my server running. Then I come back here and I go to localhost. I get this hello world string. This is an API that we've built. So I can go to to-do. I got a JSON object back with all my to-dos. If I go to to-do, I'm not going to be able to copy it. To-do, and then, oops, that's an on. Then I get the data for this to-do with this crazy long ID. So that's the server. That's the API that we'll be interacting with in the front end. This is how the front end works here. So we've got our list of to-dos. This is the index view of our application. We can click here to create a new to-do and add a title and a description. What's the to-do that you have?
Post Christmas.
Okay. What are you posting? Are you allowed to tell us? Sorry? Perfect. Go ahead and add that, and boom, there it is.
And that's a setup function that's creating like the additional one?
So the render, when we submit that form, there's an event listener on that button,
Yeah.
which is going to get the values from those input fields, create an object for a new to-do, and pass it to that create function in our to-do model, which is then going to turn that into a JSON string, post that back to our server. When that server responds saying that the to-do is successfully saved, it's then going to call our callback function that we're going to pass in. And that callback function is going to render this index view with the new data, with our new list of to-dos. Okay, so here's all of my really creative to-dos from when I was testing this out. I should have wiped the database or something. But here we can click on a single to-do and see the title and then the description. And then we can go back.
When you're toggling the views, is it just like changing the like CSS property of it, or is it actually swapping?
No, we're actually rendering HTML and then changing the inner HTML of our app element. Okay. Yeah.
So this is different from how we doing it?
Yeah.
Because
So
then- Don't we just, when you click new, don't we route to a
Well-
different page, but with the same?
watch my URL. It's never changing. Yeah, so that's the important thing. The URL is never changing and there's no page refresh. That JavaScript file that I showed you in the client folder is handling all of that. Whereas like our labs, for instance, all of the HTML was being rendered on the server. Express was rendering and then sending an HTML file. So every time we clicked on something or went to a link or submitted a form, we would go to our server. The server would render a whole new HTML file and then send that HTML file back to the client, which would then render the whole HTML file. And we'd have to change the URL each time.
I'm trying to understand how the API renders its code in the sense of, when I view source on this, if you, like, I don't know how the API is working. When I view source on it, it's a basic index file, but there's so much more data in what I see on the web page. I actually have the console log it to see that content, meaning the code, I'm sorry, see the code. Where is that code rendered? Or like, is it the fact that Ajax redoes a section of the page that's where it's stored?
So,
or like
Ajax-
what's the difference between source code and console?
That's a tricky question. So we have access now to all of the code on the client, and we can view it here. All Ajax is doing is sending data back and forth. So here's the JavaScript file, and that's all of the code in it. All Ajax is doing is taking an object, JavaScript object, converting it into a string, and then sending those bytes for that string back to our server, which is then going to turn it back into an object and do, save it to the database or whatever back there. So all of our data lives on the server. All the logic for saving our data or getting new data, all of that is on the server. This index.js file is what's controlling what shows up here in the HTML. So I can actually show you, right? We have a live view here of our HTML, excuse me. So here I've got this app element with all this HTML inside of it. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Yeah, all right, cool. So I've got this app element with all this HTML inside of it. If I click new, the HTML changes. Here. This is a different set of HTML. It's based on this template here. This template new to do. Yeah.
I mean, that's something I can digest versus at work.
But if you were to view source, it would be the same code you would see if you were to open your index file and add one.
Yeah,
Application.
yeah, exactly.
You want it to be in different routes rather than the same URL.
We have to build a front-end router, and there's a way to do that. I didn't want to get into that here.
So would these still considered as a single page?
Yeah. So you're faking it by using the browser's history API and pushing into the history whenever someone changes a page. Okay. So here I am in this SPA folder. I have my server and I have my package.json file. We need to run npm install first. So everyone go ahead and do that. In the SPA folder,
You had the
in this-
package and the server.
in my exercise file, I have an SPA folder. In it, I have just a server folder and a package.json file. That server is the server that I just showed you. We're going to build the client in class. First, we need to run package.npm install. That's going to download all the NPM packages we need for our server. After that, I'm going to cd into the server, and I'm going to run nodemon server.js. And that's going to start my server. We're using Mongo, so you may need to start your Mongo server. People seeing the lightning out here?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Run bicycles outside.
Ruh-roh.
Don't rain, please don't.
I mean, it doesn't look like it's raining right now, but
It's supposed to rain on Tuesday.
man, I gotta walk home.
Oh, that's even worse because when lightning seems like it could be rain.
Yeah. Does everybody have their server running?
I'm sorry, how do you start the Mongo server?
Mongo.
I just have Hello World.
When you go to localhost.
Yeah.
Localhost 3000. That's all you should see is the string hello world. We're gonna get this running and then we're gonna leave it alone. We're not gonna touch it again for the rest of class. Unless we run into an error, in which case we'll go look at the error and figure out what's going on. Okay, so we're gonna keep this running. I'm gonna hit Command T to open up a new tab in that same folder. Then I'm gonna cd up a level and then make the client folder.
Did you know my package?
Nodemon server.js. You have to cd into the server folder.
I didn't have this folder.
Did you run git pull upstream master? Okay, do you mind seeing if Christine will help? Is everybody here? Everybody's in the client folder?
So are we just doing what you showed us?
Yep. That's exactly what we're building. So I'm gonna make, touch an index.html file. I'm gonna call it main.css, but you can call it whatever you want. And then an index.js file. Actually, no. I'm just gonna touch those two files, and then I'm gonna make a directory called app, and then touch app index.js. Oh shoot.
You're still in the server folder.
No, we're in the client folder now.
Yeah, I had to shoot out.
Did we make a client folder?
Yes, we made a client folder.
And did you touch the files in the client?
In the client folder, yeah, that's absolutely right.
What files did you make?
I made an index.html file, a main.css file, then I made an app folder, and then inside it I made an index.js file.
And you made what? Thank you.
So we're making a directory to app folder?
Yep, that's where our JavaScript will be. Raise your hand if you have built all this stuff out. Hi, so that I can see.
How do you do that tree?
You have to, it's a third party package. If you do, I think Brew install tree. Look at it.
We've done a much on the, yeah, it's just open and.
Instead of like touching it.
Yeah, I'll literally just start dragging it. I'm like, I can't do that.
Okay. So, you're just not sure how to get.
So it's, but you also do there's some work and done and
Okay, but if I got one question, like, files to anything, discussing around and see if this thing works.
Right.
Like, what's the question jump to?
you can just make it static.
Why do they use that? It's exactly there to adjust it. What is it?
So it's not, and it's just like cleaned up. So that all the files are exactly how they were. It's just now like you're
Okay, so is it current to
yeah, I think it. I'm So. Yeah. I can see the conflict. See what it is. Do you know how much cancer or much habits? So basically what happens is that you are this conflict and what you see here is the same thing that the version of it looks like this. And then you see lines that go just like signs all the way down to the same hash. That's different. So this is your local version and this is
Oh.
so we can take this.
Oh, I see. You just- Okay, yeah.
So I took out your notes.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's gonna error. Oh, I see. Actually, there's a lot of those.
So you just create the, all, so you just have like all those files.
Oh, we screwed it all.
Inside the spot.
Yeah. So in the client folder, which is to spa client, and then in client you have all
You can create.
that. Okay.
It does. It does. I think it's something I'll just get more familiar with.
So you see that merge conflict is open at the file.
And we save the file.
So is everybody here? Everybody has these files? Everybody has Mongo running? Everybody has their server running using NodeMongo? Yes? Yes? Woo! All right. We are ready to go. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open this folder up in Atom. This is where we're going to do all of our work. We're going to leave our server running, and we're only going to refer back to it if we get an error, which hopefully doesn't happen. Doesn't work that way. Okay. All right, so this is gonna be our HTML page. This is where all our markup is gonna live, and we're gonna write out our templates. So we're gonna do HTML. We'll call this to-do list. We're gonna include a style sheet, which is the style sheet that we made before, which we called main.css. And then our body here is gonna have 4 parts. A header, right? Main, footer, and then down here we're going to build out our templates. I will copy and paste all of this except the templates into Slack. My header file is going to have a div with a class of wrapper, and then an h1. H1. There we go. To-do list. And then a paragraph tag with an emphasis tag, the world's greatest. Cool. That's going to be our header for the application. Our footer is going to have a div with a class of wrapper, and then a p with created by, I don't feel like typing this up. Jim, okay, perfect. Our company, whoops, or Hun, I don't know what Hun is, Jim. And we're gonna go ahead and copyright this to 2017. Goodbye. Our main is gonna have an ID of app, and this is where we're gonna render our views to, is this element. So all of our handlebars views, the markup, the final markup will be added here using inner HTML. The render function will return a string of HTML, and then we'll assign that string to the inner HTML of this element. All right, cool. And then the last thing I'm going to add here is this script tag. This is to handlebars. So now I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it into the general channel for Slack. Of Slack, there we go. And give everybody a minute to copy and paste this into their HTML file.
So we didn't want to npm install handlebar express because we didn't want it to come through express.
Yeah, we're not going to render our views on the server, which is what Express Handlebars does for us. Instead, we want to render our views on the client here. So we need handlebars here. There are ways you can do that with NPM and build tools. Basically compile all of your dependencies as well as your application into a single JavaScript code, but we're not going to worry about that. That would be a whole other lesson. Or a great weekend, slow Saturday, rainy Saturday afternoon thing to look up. Could be a fun thing to add to your final project. Has everybody copied and pasted this HTML into their HTML file? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, we'll give you guys one more minute. Yeah?
I have a question. Could we put default content in main and then for JavaScript override it?
Yeah.
Or, sorry, empty it out and build whatever it wants.
Yeah. We could. We are going to build this dynamically with whatever to-dos are already saved on the server. So we're going to do it dynamic. We're not going to do that. But you could. All right, how are we doing? Has everybody copied and pasted this into their index.html file? Great. Now I'm going to Slack you the CSS file that I wrote. Copy and paste that into your main.css file, and then make sure to save it.
Can we copy from the small solution?
Yeah.
Is that something?
Yeah, you can copy it from there too. That's where I'm copying it from. once you've copied the CSS into main.css, go ahead and come back to the index.html file because this is where we're going to be working next. Are we all set? Has everybody copied the CSS file? Yeah. Great. Okay. So what we want to do here, between our footer and this script tag here for handlebars, is we want to define our templates. And we need 3 templates. So we need 3 templates. One, we need one for the list of to-dos. 2, we need one for a new to-do. And then the third is for a single to-do. Yeah, exactly. Who remembers how to declare templates, handlebars templates, on the front end like this?
You use script tags.
Yeah, we use script tags. We did this maybe 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago at this point. We're going to use a script tag. We're going to declare our template inside this script tag. We're going to need a way to access this script tag in our JavaScript. So let's go ahead and give it an ID. We'll start by writing out our first template, our list of to-dos. And I'm going to prefix all of our templates with template / so that we can get them all really easily in our JavaScript. So this one we'll call to-do list, like that. We have to do something kind of clever here, which is we have to declare the type. But the browser is going to see this as a script tag, think that it's JavaScript, and try and run it, which we don't want. So we're going to give it a type of text, handlebars, template. The browser is going to see this and say, I don't know what that is, and ignore it and keep moving and keep going on with the page. Yeah, you can call it Billy Bob Jr. the Fourth. But I think this makes a little bit more sense. Okay. So we're going to create 3 of these. So I'm just going to copy and paste this 3 times, or 2 other times. The second one, we will call new to do. And the third one, we will call single to do. So now we have these ready, we're actually ready to start building out the markup inside. We'll start with our first one. Okay. Each template is going to have a outer div. So each template is going to start with a div like this, just to have a nice container for the actual markup of our application. Inside of our list here, we'll have our container, the div with the class of to-do list, and then I'll create an h2 with something like that. And then I will create a link. Which is going to take us to create a new to-do. Yeah?
You separate all those views into different files.
Yes, but then we would have to write logic for getting those files. So if we had all these in different files, they would live on the server, in our JavaScript, we would have to go to the server, get that HTML, and then get it back here in the client, and then we could render it.
So by convention, these are the only files we can have ever.
By convention, these are the only files we want to have, so that we're limiting the number of files we have to send to the server.
So we can have more. And just-
We can. We can build out our JavaScript so that it's in multiple files. Every file that we add is another HTTP request that the browser needs to make, or more logic that we need to write to get that file into the client. So by having it all, by just organizing it in this way, we don't have to worry about that. This is really just to like try and keep our life easier.
Is it also faster? Like, or,
You know, I don't know. It depends. Anything with performance, like, totally depends. It could also be slower. So we've got our title, our link to create a new to-do. Then I'm going to have a list. Here, I'm going to sort through each of my to-dos. And then inside that, I'm going to output a list item, within which I will have a link, where I will output the title of my to-do, of the current to-do. And then back up on my list item, I'm going to add a data element called an ID, where I'm going to output the ID of the current to-do. That's going to be my home view, if you will. So let's pause here. We'll get this working. I'll go ahead and Slack this to you guys. We have our template. We have our handlebars file, our handlebars here. What we need is to add this JavaScript file here so that our application code will actually run. So we'll require a script, which is at app index.js. Oh, sorry.
Can you explain the data ID thing?
This is just a way for us to add like dynamic data to an HTML element. So we can get this element when somebody clicks on it, and we can attach data to it that doesn't really fit in like any other like category data, right? Like this isn't really the ID. You can use an ID, like a HTML ID, but really this is the ID for this to do in the database.
Is there a rule to set a data types like data ID instead of using standard HTML IDs, giving us the designer more control versus taking over his ID?
So I guess we could apply styling to this, but we don't really ever want to. An ID is part of the markup, right? Like that's the way of identifying an element either for like interactivity in JavaScript or to apply styles. This is data about something that our element, HTML element, is representing. In this case, a to-do. So this is data that we're going to store in the HTML.
And if you had multiple ones, would you do like the ID2, like the ID3?
Yep. Or you'd probably give them other names. So data ID, we could do data title, data description. Any other questions about this? Let's do during office hours, because those are questions about HTML. We're going to come here to our index.js file. And here, we're going to start building out our application. What we want is, if we open up that index.html file, right now it's blank. What we want, at the very least, is to see our to-do list rendered here in this blank space. That's going to be our next step, or what we're going to tackle next. So I'm going to come back here. The first thing I'm going to do is var app is equal to document.get element by ID app. And I'm actually going to uppercase that A. That's our application, so to speak. That's where our application will live, is inside of this element. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and start my setup function. What's the purpose of this setup function? Chris?
I'm viewing it as like, once the to-do is added to the server, it's basically, is it basically creating room on the front end for it? Or
Sort of. This is like powering on our application. This function is gonna like set our application up and get it running. We have, at this point in time, we have everything we need, sort of, for our application. There's a lot more JavaScript that we're gonna write, but we pretend we've already written it. We have everything we need. This function is gonna take care of starting our application. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is we want to get our views. So let's come up here and create a variable called views and set it equal to an object. This is where we're going to store our views. This views object is going to kind of act as our controller too, because it's going to have our logic for which views will get rendered and then what happens afterwards in our setup function. So inside of this object, we want a sub-object for each of our views. Our views are to-do list, new to-do, and single to-do. And then within each of those, we'll go ahead and create a setup function that we'll write out later.
Setup function is something standard that we're using, or
We can name it anything. It makes sense to call this setup in our case because of what it's doing for us. Different applications, front-end frameworks have different conventions around how they do this, depending on like what they are, or like how the framework is implemented. But we're not using a framework, so we have to write our own way of booting up our application. All right. So now we need some place for our data for our application. So I'm going to create the model for our to-do. And all I'm going to put in here is an array with a single to-do with a title of test and a description of this is my first to-do. Just to give us some test data to make sure our views are working. Has everybody finished typing this? If you want another minute? Yes, no? No? Yes, one more minute.
No.
We'll do one more minute. Okay, nobody's typing anymore, so I'm gonna guess we're done. So we're gonna come back to our setup function. Now we have our views, a place for our views set up. We have a place for our model set up, our data. So we'll go ahead and boot up our application. What we're gonna first do is get all of our templates, all of our views from the HTML page. So document.query selector all. And then our query looks like this. This says we're looking for the property, that ID attribute that starts with template.
How strong are all the CSS selectors? Like, in the sense of, can you use all CSS selectors to write JavaScript components like that? Or JavaScript files like that?
Yeah, pretty much. I can't think of any that you can't use. You can get really creative with how you select elements here. Yeah. So this template sources variable is going to have an array of nodes from our HTML page, where each node is a template. What we need to do is pass that individual template to Handlebars so that Handlebars can compile that template. Handlebars compiles templates into a function that we can call. We can call that function and pass in some data, and it will send us back a string of HTML, or it will return a string of HTML to us. So we're going to do all of that right here. This is an array, so we're going to go ahead and loop through it.
Sorry, so you get the inner HTML from the template sources.
Yep.
And then you're going to just tweak it and then return that.
We're going to pass that inner HTML to Handlebars. Handlebars is going to compile that into a function, which we can then call to get rendered HTML with our data. We'll pass that render function an object, which will represent our to-do list or an individual to-do. Call that render function and get HTML back that we can then set as the inner HTML to our application. Okay. All right. So we're going to call handlebars.compile. We're going to pass in the template at the current index and specifically the inner HTML for that template. This is an array of DOM nodes. This is getting DOM node at the current index. We want specifically the inner HTML of that DOM node so that we can pass it to Handlebars. This here, this function is going to return a function, which is going to be our render function. We want to capture that, and then we want to add it to our to-dos, our views object up at the top. So here I'm saving it to a variable, and then I'm going to do views, write my object. We're going to use this template sources index of I. So this is going to get the current template, the DOM node for the current template. And then what we want is the ID. That ID is something like template dash single to do or to-do list. As a string. So this will almost return from our to-dos object up here, this sub-object from our views. This ID starts with template and then dash. We don't want that part. So we're going to use the substring method to get everything from the end of this template dash to the end of the string, and that's how we'll look up the current to-do. Does that make sense? So after this runs, we'll have our views object, which will be an object. We'll have a setup function in it. And then we will have a function called render, which is also a function. This function is this function here that handlebars gives back to us. And sorry, this will all live inside of the sub-object for one of our views. Okay. Now what we want to do is actually render one of those. So we'll call our app variable from the top, and we'll set the inner HTML equal to views.to-do-list.render, passing in our to-do model, and then we'll call views.to-do-list setup. So that setup function. This is going to generate the compiled HTML using our to-do model and our to-do list template. Set it as the HTML for our app, and then we're going to build out this setup function with our event listeners and things like that that are specific to that view. Okay. I come back here, I'm going to refresh, boom, there we are. Almost. Our to-do's not working. Not getting an error. Sure. Our to-do list template is being rendered, and it's outputting our sample to-do. So let's see. We can build out and wire up the other views, or we can wire this up to the server and then build out the other views after. So choose your own adventure. What do people want to do next? Yeah, okay, great. Wiring it up to the server, we'll sort of finish out this like feature of the application, and then we can go and look at the others. Cool. So this to-do is coming from here. But this isn't a real to-do for our users, right? This is one that we're generating here. We want the to-dos that are in our database. So we're going to use Ajax to go and get them. And then when we get a response back, set that data here, and then render our template with that data. So that's going to be part of our initial setup function. going to the server and getting the data that our application needs at start time. Who remembers how to do Ajax? Say it loud and proud.
We should create a request.
Yeah. How do I create a new request?
Or request for new HTTP, should be new XML.
Boom. JavaScript is a wonderfully consistent language. XML all uppercase, HTTP all lowercase, even though those are both acronyms. Right? Acronyms? Yeah. Cool. So we have our request. Now what? We want to make a GET request to our server. What do I do next? Almost. That's Express or jQuery. I'll give you guys this one as a freebie, and then the next one y'all have to do by yourselves. So this is going to create a new request for us. What we need to do then is call request.open. This is where we're going to define the method that we want to use, as well as the location where we want to send our request.
Would that be the same for calling from an API from an outside source? We just do an Ajax call like that?
That's what we're doing here. This is an external API. And then we're going to call request.send, which is actually going to send our request. And then, actually, before we do that, we need a way to handle this request when it's finished. So we will do request.onReadyStateChange. Assign that to a function. And then inside of our function, we'll have a condition. If the ready state of our request is 4, oops, and status back from the server is 200, then we've gone to the server, we've come back, and our request was successful. So here, what we can do is todo.todos is equal to json.parse request.response. This response represents the response from the server as a string. But inside that string, we have a JSON object. So we'll use json.parse to get it into a format that we can actually use in JavaScript. And then save it into our model. And then we're going to copy and paste these lines right here. So that we'll render our view with the data from the server. By George. I shouldn't say by George yet because we haven't tested it.
So do you have to have whatever packages you're using in this index.js?
Sorry?
Whatever outside packages you're using in index.js? I don't know, it's JSON?
Oh no, this is a native part of JavaScript. Yeah.
If you're using any outside package,
Where would those go? We're including handlebars through a CDN. So a link that goes and gets that script file somewhere and downloads it in the browser, just like our index.js file. Or you can use a build tool and a bundler to take all your dependencies and merge them into a single JavaScript file that you then require at the bottom of your HTML file. Okay. Should we do a drum roll to see if this worked? It worked! Woohoo! Well, we think it works. Let's do this. Localhost to do boom. All those look the same. So yeah, it worked.
If you click on one, you'll see the description.
We haven't built that part out yet.
Did you already have those in the database?
Yeah, these are the ones that I built last night when I was building out this demo. So those are there in the database. When we build out this new view, I'll delete them so that we can see that they are new. How about that? But for now, we have some data that we can work with. Cool. Let's take a 5-minute break. Really, really quick. Just stand up, stretch. It feels really hot in here. I don't know if like the heater's on or something. Maybe it's just up here because I'm next to the projector. But get some water, something like that. But just 5 minutes so that we can come back and finish building this stuff out.
Nice.
We can only, those data, they're saved in the notebooks, yeah.
Mhm.
So if you wanna see, we should like open the shell and then.
Yep.
So that's how it gets saved.
Into Mongoose, yeah.
It's like, no, it's just like somehow. what is it? We can see. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I didn't. No, it's not. But I heard maybe one.
Yeah,
I think so.
it's like 3, 2.
Yeah.
And this is it, and it's coming in. City next week.
I can't do that.
2 days.
You gotta use a wild card.
Already said.
I mean, I take like.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
I mean, this is I just.
All right, we're feeling refreshed, we're ready to go. What we're gonna build on next is the view here for creating a new to-do. We need an event listener on this link so that when you click it, we re-render or render a new view here that has our form for creating a new to-do. Then when you push the submit button in that view, we will take the values in the input fields, create an object, and send that object back to our server, which will then create a to-do in our database, and then send us back a whole list of all the to-dos now. We will then update our model here locally, and then re-render this list of all of our to-dos with our newly updated model. All right? That's an overview of the feature that we're about to build out. Where should we start?
Building the view?
Yeah, building the view. Right now, this is our view so far.
Oh, yeah.
That's not super helpful. So we're gonna have our containing div for the class of new to do. Within that, we're gonna have an h2 with new to do in it, so that we know that we're creating a new to do. And then we're gonna have a form with a class of JS new to do. And we'll go ahead and delete this whole action thing because we're not gonna use that. Our form needs three things: a text input for the title of our to-do, a text area input for the description of our to-do, and then a submit button. So I'm going to create a paragraph within which, whoops, that'll work. Create a paragraph within which I will create a label. This label will be for my title element and be title or something like that. And then I'm going to create an input for the type of text and a name of title. Then I'm going to create another P with a label, oops, description, not going to give it an ID. Let's just make it 3 columns, and we don't need any of that. Then we're going to have a button with a class of JS submit. This button is going to be type submit, and then just have the word add. Look at all that handlebars that we're using here. Yeah, there is none. It's still a handlebars template, right? But we're not using any handlebars logic inside of it. There. I'm going to go ahead and Slack this out to everybody. Give everybody a minute to copy and paste this into their application. Cool. Has everybody finished copying and pasting this into their HTML file? Yeah? Good. All right. So we have our template. What we need is an event listener on this link that will then render that template. Where should we put that? Or where in our application have we designated that we would put that kind of thing? Let's start with a file. What file will that be in? Sorry? Chris?
Assuming new to do, but it might just be in the new.
Our index.js file.
Oh,
And then what part of this file Is that going to be part of the view? Is that going to be part of the model?
What are you trying to render?
What we want to do is add an event listener to this link.
In the past, we've done it in a router, in like index.js and that like
Yes.
app puts.
So here on line 47 and 48, we're rendering our to-do list. So the view that we've rendered right now. And then we're calling a function which is going to attach any logic that this needs. We have to call this function after we render the template, because otherwise that HTML isn't on the page. So maybe should we add it to this setup function here? Yeah. After all, that new link is part of this to-do list template. So we'll go ahead and add it here. So under to-do list, I have this setup function. This is the function that I'm calling down below. We can go ahead and log so that I can prove it to you guys. There it is. This is where we're going to add our event listener.
So this is where you want to add all the JavaScript event listeners after a page is rendered.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So our to-do list view is going to get rendered, and then we're going to have this setup function for anything, any JavaScript that is for that view, like an event listener on that link. So I'm going to get the link, right? The link has a class of JS new. So this is going to get that link from the page. And then we're going to add an event listener. Listener. There we go. Listener. Yeah. So it's a link, and when you click on a link by default, the browser tries to navigate to the location for that link. We want to prevent that. How do we do that? Yeah. Event.prevent default. Now the view we want to render is this one, this new to-do view. How might we do that? Thinking back to how we rendered the to-do list view. What did we do when we rendered it? Yeah, so this to-do, new to-do object includes a render function that we'll need to call that will render that view and return to us the HTML, the final HTML for that rendered view. What do we need to do with that final HTML once we have it?
We need to replace the, what's it called, the ID app.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to walk me through that? What I'm going to write right here? Yeah.
So we have the down air HTML component.
Yeah. What variable do I have that has that main, where our app is stored? Where our app is stored.
Is it in ID template to do on index.html? Oh, sorry, app.
Yeah.
App.
So app, we're going to set the inner HTML, right? What are we going to set the inner HTML to?
To
Yeah.
Views.to was set up for.
Yeah, perfect. So views.new-to-do.render. So this views object contains all of our views. New to do is the view that we want to render. And then per our setup function, there's a render function in here that we're then going to call. Once we've done that, this is going to set the HTML of our app to this view. Once we've done that, what do we need to do? Very last step here. It's right on the tip of your tongue.
Add it to the to-do list.
Nope, it's already there. Our markup is already there. Our markup is there. What we need is to attach or
Have a rendering setup.
we need to call the setup function. Which currently our setup function doesn't do anything, but it will in a minute. So we're setting the HTML, and then we're calling this setup function. All right, you guys ready to see if it works? Refresh. Is that pretty cool?
So the view automatically overrides the other view. Like,
Yeah. So it's assignment, right? We have this app.innerHTML. This render function is going to return a string of HTML. And we're assigning that returned string of HTML to the inner HTML of our app element. So we're overwriting it. Yeah. And then calling this setup function. Okay, so we're about halfway through implementing this feature. If I select, what's a good to do? What's something that I need to do? Can be anything. Sky's the limit, yeah. Final project. What's your final project? In one sentence.
Find your council member.
That. Now, when I hit this add button to add my to-do, I'll make a lot of money or something. My Nimbus 3000 will come flying in, and then I'll zoom off. Right? What's going to happen when I push that button? Nothing. Woo, yeah, great big fat nothing. That's not what we want. What we want is for when someone clicks that button to get the data from this form and send it back to our server so that we can create a to-do in the database. And then we'll go back to the index view where we'll then list all of the to-dos, including the one that we just created here, where I need to go and build out my final project. So what's the first step in that? I'm going to click this button.
Event listener.
Yes, an event listener. Where am I going to put that event listener?
Setup function is underneath.
Yeah, and the setup function under my new to-do. That's absolutely right. So let's see, I have to get it done.
Let's try pseudo.
People feeling a little brain dead? So it's been a long class. All right, so I'm going to get my submit button. I'm going to add an event listener here. It's a submit button on a form. So it's going to try and post the form data back to the server, which we don't want. So we're going to prevent the default. Like that. And bring this back up here. We're going to prevent the default behavior from happening. I'm going to get that form. And then I'm going to create an object, which is going to represent my new to-do. This is the object that I'll send back to the server. So what data does my to-do have? 2 pieces of data.
Description.
Yeah, title and the description. So the title lives in my new form in the input, specifically the value of that input. And then the description is equal to, also lives in that new form, is in the text area, and specifically, I want the value. So someone clicks that button, we're going to prevent the default behavior, we're going to get our form, and then we're going to build our to-do item by getting the value of the input, text input, and the value of the text area. So the title of our to-do, as well as the description for our to-do. Now I need a way to save this to-do, to send it back to the server. Yeah, we need to do a request, but we need some functionality in our model that will take care of creating or editing or deleting to-dos. Because that action is related to our data, we want to put it in our model. So what we want is something like todo.create, where we can pass in this new to-do, and then a callback function, there we go, that's going to get called when this works, or when this is done.
I thought to do is just an object that you declare.
Yeah, this right here. This is an object, but that object represents our data. So conceptually, it's our model.
But doesn't that live on the server?
We also have a model on the server that interacts with the database. We want one locally because we want that same behavior.
Did you write the create function too, or is that?
Nope, we're going to write it right now.
Okay.
Can I get it started? What does my create function take as parameters? 2 things. Yeah.
I don't know what you're creating.
We're going to take a to-do from our form, and then we're going to send it using Ajax to our server so that our server will save it. When our server comes back, we're then going to perform some action that the user will specify based on it coming back from the server and being successfully saved.
You have the header and the body.
That's all going to be part of our request. This function needs 2 things. The to-do that we want to save, and then the function that we want to call when this is all done. So to-do and a callback. Now we're going to create an XML HTTP request. I gave you guys the first one. Y'all have to do this one. Ruh-roh. Do you guys want to do it together?
It's bar request. Equal, XML. And request dot even. Get.
Are we making a GET request? Yeah. Post.
And I think it's all still in to do.
What's my URL?
Local,
That's because you're adding it to the array, or
The database.
sorry.
This is the route for my to-dos.
I just save change. And, if requests, if everything went well,
Yeah. Then we're going to call this callback and we're going to pass in the request response.
and the callback is what you want to render, or?
That's where we're going to render our view. This callback is something that the user is going to pass in, that we're going to pass in up above, that is then going to get called when all this is done. So it's a way for us to designate what we want to happen after all of this has happened, or what we want to do once all of this has happened. There's one last step.
A request.send.
Nailed it. Now, we want to send this object back. In order to do that, we need to call encode URI, which is going to strip out any spaces, turn them into hyphens, things like that. Basically make it a URL. And then we need to assign it to data, like this.
So before we use this, we made a call to an API. We never sent anything, we just sent it as empty. And this, we're sending the.
Yeah, so here we want to send this back to the server. This is our request body. This is the data that we're sending in our post requests. Express is going to read this out, add this to the request object as request.body, and then give us, it'll be request.body.data. An object that we can then work with on the server. Cool. So the last thing we need to do in order to have this working is build out this callback function. Basically, this is going to run, right? We're going to call to-do.create, passing in the to-do that we build from our form, and then a function. It's going to call this create function, which is then going to create our AJAX request, sending this to-do back to the server. There. Sending this to-do back to the server. When it comes back and is successful, then we're going to call this function that we're passing in. So we need to write that function. Right here. What do we want at a high level, conceptually? What do we want to do in this function? 3 things. 2 things. This to-dos is going to be our new list of to-dos.
You need to make a request call again to get all the data.
Nope, that's what this is going to be.
Okay, so you already have.
Yeah, we already have them, but we have them here. We want them here so that we can work with them with the rest of our application.
You just put it in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to update our model. So that's what that's going to do. Update our model so that our model is up to date, has the most recent data. So once we've done that, what do we want to do? Our application will still be on the new view. Yeah, using the new view. So I'll go ahead and do this right now. Oops. So we can do that's going to update our model, our local model on the client. And then we want to do app.innerHTML is equal to views.to-do-list.render. And we'll pass in our model with a whole list of to-dos. And then views.to-do-list.setup. We'll call our setup function. Hopefully all this worked. New. Query selector of
You had it under locate app.
Oh, yeah.
where do I have it?
Is it to do, create new to do?
Cannot read property query selector. No. Oh. There we go. So it was looking this up and not getting anything. So it was assigning a value of null to that. And then the rest of our code wasn't working. So we'll come back, click new, make this work, maybe. And then we get another error on line 67. Request.send. There we go. Okay.
What did you add?
So I had to set the header for our post request, and specifically the content type. Because we're sending a request body, we have to set the content type for that request body so that when the server gets it, it knows what to do with it.
I'm gonna figure that out.
Yeah, this is just part of Ajax that we'll have to learn. So if you run into errors, Google them, and then this would probably come out. If not, reach out to us on Slack. Okay, and fin. This works. Homework is to make it so that when you click on one of these, it shows the show view for this to do. I'll update the assignment file. And then also to do a couple things for your final project, like create a repository if you haven't already under your own account. Write out the README that I give you a sample for. Add in your user journeys as well as your wireframes, etc. And then I think that's it.
Exactly. Can you just copy and paste the Next.js?
Oh yeah, this one? So you have the solution.
Um,
So I'll copy and paste this one in. so that you have it. You have the solution if you want to refer to it, but I would challenge you to try and do this without looking at the solution, even if it's a struggle. Yeah, question.
What if I did, still on the server side, that doesn't do like localhost 300, 3000 to see the application, but it's still doing all the templating and everything in the client side.
Yeah, you can serve it locally. You can do that with Node, or you can download a package called HTTP serve or something like that. You install it globally, and then you can just run that command in the command line, and it'll create a server at your current file, right, your current directory. But you can just open up the index.html file if you've got it like this.
We have questions about our final project.
Yeah.
Should we scroll back then?
Yes.
General or?
Yes. Who or should you?
Should we start under general or random?
Oh, just reach out to us.